Welcome to Verdict Watch. Today we're covering one of the most groundbreaking legal moments in history: International Court of Justice versus Climate Inaction. In July 2025, the ICJ, often called the World Court, issued a unanimous advisory opinion declaring that nations have a binding legal duty to act on climate change. This ruling is already being described as a turning point for international law, environmental policy, and human rights. At stake is not just environmental policy, but the legal accountability of governments worldwide. In this video, we'll explore the origins of the case, the arguments presented, the court's reasoning, and what this landmark opinion means for the future of our planet and generations to come. The case began when a coalition of Pacific Island nations, led by Vanuatu, formally petitioned the United Nations to seek an advisory opinion from the ICJ. These nations are among the most vulnerable to climate change, facing rising sea levels, stronger storms, and threats to their very survival. The request asked the ICJ to clarify whether states have a legal obligation under international law to prevent and mitigate climate harm. The move reflected growing frustration with decades of slow progress in global climate negotiations. For small island states, climate inaction is not an abstract problem. It's a question of survival. Their bold step put the issue in front of the world's highest court for the first time in history. The International Court of Justice, based in The Hague, Netherlands, is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. While it normally resolves disputes between countries, it also has the authority to issue advisory opinions on matters of international law when requested by UN bodies. These opinions aren't legally binding like judgments in disputes, but they carry enormous weight. Historically, ICJ advisory opinions have influenced treaties, guided national laws, and shaped international norms. This case, Obligations of States in Respect of Climate Change, was the first time the court addressed climate obligations directly, signaling a new era where environmental responsibility and international law are no longer separate conversations. The ICJ was asked two central questions. First, do states have a legal obligation to protect the climate system for present and future generations? And second, what are the consequences under international law when states fail to meet those obligations? These questions touched on multiple areas of law: international treaties like the Paris Agreement, human rights law recognizing the right to a healthy environment, and general principles of state responsibility. By framing the issue this way, petitioners forced the court to confront not just environmental science, but legal accountability. For the first time, climate inaction itself was put on trial before the world's most authoritative legal body. Nations and organizations from around the world submitted arguments to the ICJ. Supporters, including over 100 countries, argued that climate change poses an existential threat and that existing treaties and customary law already impose duties to act. They highlighted obligations to reduce emissions, protect ecosystems, and cooperate globally. Opponents, including major fossil fuel exporters, cautioned the court against overstepping, warning that such a ruling could spark endless lawsuits and disrupt economies. NGOs and human rights groups emphasized the justice dimension, reminding the court that the poorest and least responsible nations suffer the most severe impacts. The debate was as much about fairness as it was about law. On July 23, 2025, the ICJ issued its historic opinion. The court declared unanimously that states do, in fact, have binding legal obligations under international law to combat climate change. These duties stem from human rights treaties, environmental conventions, and general principles of international law. The court made it clear: failure to act is not just bad policy. It can constitute an internationally wrongful act. This landmark ruling reframed climate change as a matter of legal duty, not political choice. By elevating climate action into the realm of international law, the ICJ gave new momentum to lawsuits, policies, and negotiations around the world. The ICJ clarified that states which fail to meet their climate obligations could face international legal consequences. These include obligations to cease harmful actions, prevent further damage, and in some cases, provide reparations. Reparations might mean financial compensation, ecological restoration, or other measures to address harm caused. Importantly, the court noted that these obligations apply to both current and future generations. This language is powerful. It places legal accountability on governments not only for what they do today, but also for the legacy they leave tomorrow. Climate inaction, in legal terms, is now more than a policy debate. It's a breach of duty. One of the most striking parts of the ICJ's opinion was its recognition of climate change as a human rights issue. The court affirmed that people everywhere have the right to live in a healthy environment, and that states have a duty to safeguard that right. This ties climate obligations directly to fundamental human rights, such as life, health, and food security. The message is clear. Failing to curb emissions is not just an environmental failure, but a violation of human dignity. This recognition strengthens the hand of activists, indigenous communities, and vulnerable populations who can now argue their human rights are being violated by climate inaction. The ruling sparked immediate global reactions. Pacific Island nations hailed it as a historic victory for humanity. Environmental groups celebrated the recognition that climate delay is now legally indefensible. Meanwhile, fossil fuel-dependent economies voiced concerns about potential lawsuits and financial claims. Some major powers remained cautious, emphasizing that the opinion is not legally binding. Still, the court's authority makes it extremely influential. Around the world, legal scholars, activists, and policymakers are already exploring how to use the ruling to advance stronger climate action at home and abroad. In short, the ICJ lit a legal fire under the global climate movement. This advisory opinion doesn't create enforceable law on its own, but it reshapes the battlefield for future climate litigation. Already, courts in Europe, Asia, and Latin America are handling lawsuits against governments for failing to meet climate targets. With the ICJ's opinion, these cases gain stronger legal footing. The decision could also influence negotiations in climate summits, where countries may face greater pressure to commit to deeper cuts. Even corporations might be impacted, as governments strengthen regulations to avoid liability. In short, the ICJ ruling arms judges, lawyers, and activists with a powerful legal tool that can accelerate climate accountability worldwide. For nations, the lesson is simple. Climate action is no longer optional. The ICJ opinion highlights that states cannot delay or ignore their responsibilities without risk of international liability. Governments must not only set ambitious targets, but also follow through with real action. This ruling creates moral and legal pressure, especially on wealthy countries with high emissions. At the same time, it emphasizes cooperation, reminding the world that climate change is a shared challenge requiring collective effort. The message is unmistakable. Protecting the planet is not just an environmental choice, it's a legal duty every nation must honor. In conclusion, International Court of Justice versus Climate Inaction marks a watershed moment. The ICJ declared that nations have a binding duty to combat climate change, protect human rights, and preserve the planet for future generations. While advisory, the opinion will influence courts, parliaments, and climate talks for years to come. It shows that inaction is no longer just politically costly, it is legally indefensible. For vulnerable nations, it's a victory of recognition. For major powers, it's a wake-up call. And for all of us, it's a reminder that the fight for climate justice is now firmly a matter of law. This is Verdict Watch. Stay informed and stay engaged.